recording, but don't worry, because I'll edit that. Hold on.
Okay, good.
Okay.
What about the lighting? I need some bottom light. No.
You know what
Get rid of the wrinkles.
Here's our compassion pumpkin to remind you to smile.
The good part and the bad part.
Okay.
The videos that we recorded yesterday, there's a meeting recording limit of 100 minutes. But we recorded for more than 370 minutes or something.
Lose.
We did not lose, but it takes them some time to recover it.
Okay.
So it could be today or
I was like, oh man, do we lose what we actually
Could
did
be
yesterday?
today or tomorrow. But what they said is like it's recorded somewhere on Amazon servers.
They just have to
They
find
just
it.
have to recover and find this large file. They allow 5 gig, which I did not read in my contract, 5 gig or 100 minutes.
Okay.
And we exceeded both of them. That's why it was saying 0, because it doesn't know what to.
It's like, I don't know what you want from me.
So it's not combination. It's either or. It's either 5 gig.
Okay.
Because if you record from an HD camera,
Uh-huh.
5 gigs goes like 10 minutes.
Oh,
Not HD, 4K. 4K camera.
okay.
But on this one, you can go for like 100 minutes. So I separated them.
Oh, okay.
See?
Cool.
Have you two known each other long?
Yeah.
Many, many lives.
Many,
No.
No, it's like I tell this joke. I'm in underwear because she gives me massages. So it's very few people that I'll be in my underwear. So I had to trust her at a tremendous level to be in my underwear.
Oh. Yeah, we met at a group we used to go to called Life Tree Cafe. Discussion group.
Oh yeah? Where was that?
It was a coffee house over on the corner of St. Joe and Clinton. That doesn't exist anymore.
Higher ground. No, it's a higher ground.
Higher Grounds? Oh,
No,
Yeah, was that? No,
it's not higher ground.
it was independent. Yeah.
It's actually really good. So he talked about compassion at that time.
So I don't know what to expect. Do I need to know anything going in or just?
Yeah, I'll prep you here in just a second.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get some color.
Okay, Jessica asked you to move to the couch or outside after,
A certain time?
Yeah, because apparently she can't concentrate when she's doing it. But I think outside would be better for what we do. But the David is fine, but later.
Okay.
How many are you doing
You're
today?
comfortable.
A bunch?
5?
5 today?
Okay.
Did Josh come from?
He did. And then I asked him if he got the email, and I have not heard back from him yet. So I guess if I don't, then I'll add his email.
No, just you just had to tell him and then edit then his icon. You had to start his webinar and edit.
Add his, yeah, I don't have his email address. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Josh@coffee.com, I think.
Okay.
I'll just give it to you when you're ready.
Yeah, whenever. Okay.
I made everything easy for you, snacks and water, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
Have you ever heard of like Reiki?
A little.
She does something similar to Reiki, but it's non-invasive. It doesn't require touching the body, called pranic healing.
Oh, I think I saw that on her website. She had like these various sessions. I
Yeah.
was wondering. I did a little research.
It's working.
Yes.
You're getting hits.
This is just gonna be like if you're talking and I think of a question or something, I'm just gonna write it down. I don't have to feel nervous about it. So basically what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do a short intro. I'm gonna say, who I am, what we're doing, and then I'm gonna say, this is David, and then you can introduce yourself. So say, tell us a little bit about yourself. So you can just say whatever you feel is relevant. Do you have a business that ties into compassion, or if you have more of a personal story, whatever.
1 second.
Okay.
After you get done with him, download with him.
Right away. Okay.
right away, and then it'll be in the hard drive.
Okay. And then I'll ask you questions. So I'm going to ask you like what role compassion has played in your life.
Okay. Most of those answers will be probably personal rather than business related.
Okay, you can go whatever direction you want with it. If you're like,
Okay.
you know, I had this moment and this happened, and that's whatever story you want to tell, whatever.
How personal do we want to get?
It's up to you how personal you
Okay.
want to get.
Okay.
I mean,
And what
I'm
are you
just asking
editing
the
this down to?
questions.
How many minutes?
We're gonna do this about 15 to 20 minutes,
Okay.
depending on. So the idea is just that we kind of like get in a conversational flow about it,
Okay.
and just kind of have a chat or like an interview, you know. So if we get to a point where it's like, okay, you know, it's kind of time to end, like we'll do that.
Then
But
you'll edit it.
yeah,
So
yeah,
whatever
So-
extras in there, you'll cut out.
yeah, pretty much. So for the most part, like, I mean, unless something really ridiculous happens, like I'm probably not going to edit out much of what we are saying. I'm
Right.
more like going to edit out this part right now that it's recording.
We're recording now.
Yeah, or the after part, or
Now,
things
do you
like
want
that.
me to always look at you, or should I look at the audience?
Just you can just kind of go back and forth. Like I'll.
And when I'm looking here, do I look at the camera or here? Where does it look like I'm looking straight when they watch it? Here I'm looking at the camera, and here I'm looking down at the screen. That when I look at the screen, it looks like I'm looking down.
Okay, then maybe look at the camera.
Does that look to you
Yeah.
like I'm looking up? Okay.
Just be natural about it. You don't have to be like. The idea is just like you're a real, authentic person, and we're just having a conversation.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be nervous. Just relax. Whatever you would normally like. So what I hope will happen is that, you know, because this is a topic that means something to you, right?
It does, and there's so many directions I could go with compassion. In 10 or 15 minutes, I'm trying to pick which
Well, we have up to
avenue.
20.
Yeah,
So
because I see different kinds of compassion that I'm involved in. There's personal compassion, which is how I relate to my wife, people on the street, handing out money to the guys with the signs, which I do. And then I see a societal compassion, which I'm probably more involved in, and that is issues of social justice and equality. To me, that's compassion on the
well, how about I ask
downtrodden.
the question like what role compassion plays in your life, and then you can start with that, talking about how you see different types of compassion,
Okay.
and then go into whatever way that just kind of naturally flows, wherever the conversation goes with that.
Okay.
Then, you know, if you feel
There's
like
whole
you start
stories either
talking,
way.
yeah, if you start talking more about societal compassion or personal compassion, whichever way it goes will be fine. There's no like right or wrong or anything at all.
Okay.
And then, do you have a business or a project that you're working on or
I have a
anything?
blog,
Okay.
lifewalk.info,
Okay.
where most of the blogs are about that kind of thing. A lot of them are book reviews, and then social commentary, a few personal things here and there.
Okay. It's LifeWalk.
Yeah, lifewalk.info. And then my wife and I have reunionsingers.com, which is, we have recorded a couple of CDs. They're mostly what you would call contemporary Christian CDs. Even though we've come out of organized, institutionalized religion since we made them, I still find them valid. But our story is basically one of her compassion of me being unfaithful, us breaking up, getting a divorce, and then doing what is always advised against, getting remarried.
Yeah.
You won't find hardly a counselor who won't advise against that. But
Yeah.
it's worked for us. In total, we've been together over 30 years now. 19
Awesome,
before the
babe.
breakup, and then a bunch since then. So there's that personal compassion, and then there's the whole thing we've become involved in, which is the social justice issues. So,
Okay, all right.
that might
So
give you
at the
some.
very end, I'm going to say, unless we already get into it, unless it comes up, you know, more organically, I'm going to say, well, tell us a little bit about LifeLock. You can be like, you know, I do blogs. This is what basically what you just said, and
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, and you make music, right? And then you can go into that, and that'll kind of be
Okay.
like, that's what I've been doing with everybody at the end. Like, okay, how do we get in touch with you if somebody wants to learn more about you or talk with you or things like that?
Okay.
So All right, you feel good about the format?
Oh, yeah.
Ready to go? Okay.
Especially since you're editing it, I'm not nearly as worried as if it were live.
Yeah, right. We'll edit it, and then after it's edited, we'll put it up as a live video.
Right.
So you'll be good to go.
All
All
right.
right, perfect.
And are you doing all these, putting them all up at the same time, or are you putting them up one a day for
One a day.
21 days? or
One
something?
a day. So there will be each day of the 21-day challenge. There'll be some, and if we end up with more interviews, then we'll just keep carrying on, or we'll do multiple ones a day. I'm not sure, but
I bought a bag today of cotton balls too. Do the whole container thing.
yes, exactly. Okay. All right. Let's get started.
I'll just let you lead the way.
Let me get my
Now, have you done a lot of these?
the
Not with the
interviews?
compassion challenge, but this kind of.
No, this is my first time doing a
Oh,
challenge
okay.
like this. So, and it's just kind of like everything's falling into place.
Oh,
Like,
great.
so I'm pretty excited. Like,
Cool.
compassion itself is a huge part of my life. So it's a big part of my personal practice. Okay. Hi, this is Amy with Be Radiant Inside and Out. As part of our 21-day compassion challenge, I am interviewing people who have a deep connection to compassion, and we're going to get to hear David's story and how that plays out in his life. Dave, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dave. I'm from Fort Wayne, and I'm involved in various social justice activities, and I have a blog, and I'm semi-retired.
So how has compassion been an important part of your life?
Well, the most important part has been on a personal level between my wife and I. We had some troubles, and we had split. We were separated and then eventually divorced. That was 90%, maybe 98% my fault.
Thanks for being honest.
I had not been faithful to her, and so we had broke up. And then, against all advice, a couple years later, we got back together and got remarried, and things were better and had been better than they had ever been. Much of that due to her compassion. It was a learning experience for both of us. We actually both had to have compassion for each other because we had discovered what her contributions to the trouble was. It's never one-sided.
Yeah.
Very rarely. And so while the 98% was my fault, she had realized she had to be responsible for her 2%. So the compassion in that kind of a breakup in relationship, the healing process, it was astonishing, the compassion that she showed. And, it was a learning experience for both of us.
So what do you think was maybe a technique or like a breakthrough moment or something that really helped you or affected you deeply within that? Like, you know, was there a specific like moment of compassion or something that you learned to do together that really helped you work through that?
It was really a learning process that we did together rather than one moment. We did have counseling, of course. And I think one of the biggest things was in learning compassion was simply the act of having compassion, of not saying it's their fault or this is your problem, you need fixed. Communicating. We read a book called 5 Love Languages. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's about how people miss each other. And you'll be doing something that you think is serving them. They'll be doing something that they think is serving you, but you're on different planes and you don't realize that both people are trying, but they're not doing the language the other person speaks.
They're speaking different languages. They're missing. They're not understanding.
Right. And so when you get that and you start to see each other, not as adversaries, but, you know, as people who you are doing your best, you are trying to connect. And really even people we don't like or get along with on some level, they're doing what they know to do. They're living the life as much as they can with their background and with their settings. And so that helps you have compassion on people, knowing everyone has their own baggage.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, married couples, they each come in with their own baggage. And there are a lot of things you don't even think to discuss.
Yeah,
Before
and
you
then it
get
comes up and
together.
you're like, what?
Yeah,
That thing.
that thing. So just the humanity of it and seeing people that way, I think helps lead to compassion. And having compassion showed you should lead to compassion. I
Yeah.
guess it doesn't always, but certainly that should.
Starts to rub off, I think.
It should. So yeah, I guess not one moment, but that whole process. We knew when we got back together, we both said, "This is a crapshoot. We don't know if this is going to work." It didn't work the first time, and so we went into it knowing that we had both had an out.
Yeah.
We were already done with it, and yet we
Made a
realized
conscious
we
decision.
made a conscious decision because apart from each other, one thing we both realized is there wasn't anyone else we wanted to spend our lives with.
Oh.
So yeah, and just
So now how long have you been together? Like if you add all the time up, how much of your lives have you spent together now?
Spent together 1979. So that's 30 something. Are you better at math? I can't do that off the top of my
30
head.
something years. Let's just leave it
30-something,
there.
yeah.
Let's not
Yeah.
embarrass ourselves with that.
Yes. 19 the first time, and then almost that again. So
Yeah. So 38?
yeah. Wow, time flies.
Almost 40.
I never forget our anniversary, but I just don't remember
Good
how
job.
many years it is. But I never forget the anniversary. So,
Get something with the year on it this time, and then you
I
can keep
should do
adding.
that, yeah.
You'll know next year. Okay, one more.
Yeah. And I'm learning compassion for other people. I guess, frequently I'm a walking contradiction, and my wife has pointed this out. Counselors have pointed this out. Personality tests where people are usually pigeonholed, I'm all over the place.
You're more gray.
I am. So there is this compassionate part of me, but of course there's this selfish part of me that I'm trying to overcome. And when you had mentioned on your website this general worldwide compassion thing, I went to their site, and one of their challenges was compassion while driving.
Yes, compassion while driving. That's good.
That's probably one of the best tests, I think, of a person's true mindset is when they're behind the wheel of a vehicle.
See, I don't understand road rage. Like, it doesn't, I guess probably because I'm probably the frustrating person, not the frustrated person. Because I'm always like, I don't have to drive as fast. Like, I'm good driving the speed limit. I don't have to go faster, or I'm just comfortable where I'm at. I don't have to weave in and out. And I feel like people around me get frustrated. They're like, why isn't she speeding up? Why didn't she move into that spot? Why didn't she take that right turn? So I think I see it from the opposite perspective, where I'm like, maybe they're just comfortable where they're at, or I see where I think sometimes people who get really upset in traffic, they think they never make traffic mistakes.
Oh yeah.
And then I ride with people who get really upset in traffic, and I'm like, you just cut that person off. And if that happened to them, they'd be so angry. They'd be like, what's wrong with you? And so I guess I just see it from the other perspective, where I'm like, we all are we're in our own world when we drive. I know. Right. I've heard it said in other countries, I think in India, they beat their horns a lot, but they're not. The way it was explained to me, even in the chaos, the reason they're doing it is because here we drive for ourselves. We're beeping like you're in my way, and there they drive for each other. So if they beep, they're like, hey, you're going to get hit over here.
Right.
So, I don't know if that's accurate, but that's how it was explained to me. And I always I like that idea. I was like, I never thought about it that way, So it's like they're trying to help you out, hey, go over here, do that. Whereas here we're like, why are you in my way?
Right, and that is the wrong use of the horn. The horn is for warning, or for I guess if they're sitting at a light for 5 minutes, you want to tap on it to let them know to go.
I'd really like to have Acme signs on cars, because where I live at, I have to slow way down, and it's right off of an on ramp, coming merging on. And I have a private drive, and there's a no outlet sign there, and people beep at me all the time because they think you're an idiot, you're turning around in the wrong spot, or they're just mad that I slowed down there. So I want a little sign on my car that says, I live here. I actually live here. I know what I'm doing, Sorry about that. Didn't mean to, didn't realize you were right on top of me trying to get around me. Jesus.
Signs could be helpful.
Yeah, but of course, then people would, abuse them. But I always think it'd be a nice thing to do. The little button with an intercom. Hey, sorry to get in your way.
Megaphone or something.
Well, I really like what you said about everybody's doing the best that they can. That's something when I work with clients that if they're having relationship issues, I always try to help to come to an understanding of. I actually got this from Matt Kahn. He's very big on like loving whatever arises. And he says, everyone is doing the best they can. And if they could do better, they would. And at first, like your initial reaction to that is like, no, that's not true. There are people not doing their best.
Yeah.
Like they're not doing their best. I didn't do my best. But the truth is the real, like the deepest layer of truth there is that like you're a good person, right? Like, but whatever that situation was, whatever circumstances led up to right there, that was all you had at that moment.
Right.
That was it, So it really comes down to if you can find that compassion for yourself and you can find that like acceptance of not being upset at yourself, I didn't do my best, then, from that mindful state of like cultivating like your inner self, you can start to have more awareness of, maybe that person's really just tired, or maybe they haven't eaten today, or whatever the situation is, or, even though we feel like we're aware of what's going on, maybe even with our spouses, like you said, you can be just missing each other with love languages or things like that. We never really know what's going on. We never really 100% know the depth of what their struggle is or what their, so, having that compassion like that.
And that's something I've struggled with. I'm doing much better than I used to. And some of the same concepts that you're talking about are in a book by Eckhart Tolle called Power of Now, which is a powerful book. And I find a lot of those basic concepts cross Christianity, Buddhism, various things. If it's true, it's true. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's true. And so I've read that and I've reread it, and I have little cards. It's training, and I do think everyone's doing their best. Now, you have to have the balance where you don't allow yourself to be abused. You think of an abused spouse. Sure, she can have compassion towards her husband. Maybe he's doing the best. But when the fist is coming in your face, there's still a time. Compassion does not mean not standing up for yourself or for someone else. So you have to realize that compassion isn't wishy-washy. And speaking of, like we did the Christianity, when Jesus did the whole turn the other cheek, people see that as weak, but that was standing in the oppressor's face. I'm not backing down, but I'm not going to hurt you. Yeah. I'm going to stand here, and you're going to know who you're hitting, and you're going to know why. It's one of the bravest things you can do. Sometimes, really, I think making a person come face to face with that, like I'm not fighting back. And was it the peaceful resistance? That's kind of how it works. Like I'm not fighting back. Like it really completely like throws in the person's face, like this is you doing all of this. Right. Like you have to you're gonna have to go home. You're gonna have to eat this. That's what you're gonna have to live with this moment. Yeah. So in Buddhism, there's this story of the Buddha is going to speak, and a man comes up and he's very angry, and he's you're a fake and you're all of these things and you shouldn't be teaching, right? And he says, well, if you buy someone a beautiful gift and they don't accept it, whose gift is it? Says, well, of course it's mine. He says, well, it's the same with anger. And I think in those situations where you're talking about the turning the other cheek, you're saying, I'm just going to be a mirror for you right now. I'm going to let you see completely exactly what you're doing. Right. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up abuse too. There's a woman that I know, Lisa Hawkins, and she does relationship counseling. She helps men and women understand each other better, to have better relationships, like what the different needs are. And she said something one time, I love this, and she said, no is a complete sentence. Yes. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to tell them no. Right. So I think that's an important thing to tie in, because sometimes we look at compassion and stuff and we say, it means just being weak. It means just rolling over. That's not it at all. Compassion is a place of strength. So a lot of self-confidence, because to be compassionate towards someone else, you generally have to be pretty okay with yourself.
Yeah.
Because, it's cliche-ish, but you can't really love others. There isn't the proper kind of self-love involved.
Absolutely.
So
You said you do book reviews of.
yes.
So what do you think, if you could recommend one book that you've reviewed right now, and you can go to his website and see the review then, as far as compassion, like what has really touched you, or where do you think that would be the best lesson someone could go like right now and pick up that book? To really put you on the spot.
That does. It's hard to recommend one. I did mention The Power of Now. I think I reviewed that with a couple of other books at the same time, so it might not have its own, but you can find it on the website. I come from a Christian background, and so, but my wife and I have kind of come out of the institutionalized religion portion, which is frequently actually direct opposition to the teachings of Jesus anyway. But from that perspective, I would say a book like Love Wins by Rob Bell. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that is universal compassion. And that's what I would refer to it as, about how we are all on the same playing field and we're all on the same level. And kind of not letting your religious tradition define you, for lack of a better word. Your tradition leads you and guides you, but it shouldn't limit you and put you in a box.
So it should be like a starting point, like the base that you can return to, but a place to grow from.
Yes. And far too often in various religious traditions, it's limiting, and that leads to a lack of compassion because there's you and there's the other.
Intolerance.
Yes, and intolerance. And that's where then the social justice compassion that I'm involved in, which not a lot physically. I've attended rallies and gatherings and things, but usually it's with finances and blog posts and signing petitions, signing letters, sending emails, fighting for those who are being oppressed and downtrodden, which, again, returning to my tradition and following Jesus, his basic teachings weren't about how to escape this life or how to be somewhere else later, but about how we treat people here and now, our interactions with people, our interactions with our environment and the planet. And he frequently stood against the powers that be to stand up for the weak, the mistreated. Some of those teachings at the time were revolutionary. I mean, we look at them and see how primitive they were for that time period. But within that time period, they were revolutionary. You don't just walk in and end slavery. So the first step is treat your slaves like a brother or sister. And we look at that. Yeah, but they still had slavery. Okay, it's a progression. There was still compassion, and that's I try to fight for that kind of compassion for those who are being oppressed and downtrodden, mistreated, and not being treated equally.
I was raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, and I remember like the first time that I saw something that said, Jesus was a rebel, and I had never thought of it that way. Like I never really thought like, oh yeah, he was really stepping out against the grain. He was really, like we hear the stories over and over again, and then it's just kind of unless something kind of shakes the way you think about it, you may not go back and like really look at it differently and see further applications.
Those parts are downplayed and they're almost neutralized by. And when I use the term Christianity, obviously there are 40.
You're talking very
Christian denominations,
very broadly.
And a lot of them have always got that, but the tradition I was in didn't get that. And so coming out of that, seeing with new eyes. And reading, I recommend reading things you wouldn't normally read.
Expanding your perspective.
Yeah.
And then you can determine, like, is that the truth? Like, you feel in your body when things are true.
Right.
And the more you cultivate, that inner space and that mindfulness, and the more easy it is to know this is truth for me versus it's just something coming in that maybe doesn't work for me.
Right. And that's the meditation helped with that. My wife and I took some free meditation courses at community center or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
For seniors, since we're both seniors. And then
you're a senior.
And then I'm 63. So, in case you're wondering. that and the Eckhart Tolle, you start reading things. If you allow things to click, which if you're in any fundamentalist religion, a lot of times that's advised against, because here's the truth and you don't vary it from that. But if you allow yourself to be open and things start clicking, it's weird how the doors start opening and one thing leads to another. And then you realize all these truths you hadn't realized, or at least see them in a new perspective. Before the Eckhart Tolle book, I read a book by Philip Yancey called What's So Amazing About Grace. That was one of the first clicks.
Yeah.
Because he talked about people who we didn't consider Christians, who he said you couldn't understand apart from their Christianity. They were liberals and you couldn't be liberal and be a Christian. So, and even those definitions, I like a lot of the Buddhist teachings I've read, and there's full of compassion. And the mindfulness you keep mentioning, I think that leads to compassion.
Yeah, because you have to, I think you really have to be, and I talked about this in another interview, how like you have to know how what you're doing affects you before you can have any idea of how it affects anyone else to have that compassion. So if you're screaming and yelling and you don't understand how that's actually making you feel, how the screaming and the yelling is actually, feeding that fire and making you more upset and making you more emotional in a way that you can't control, it's more reacting, then how can you begin to be aware and understand when someone else is acting like that, to have compassion for that? Because you're not even having compassion for yourself. Right. You're still putting yourself through it. Anything that we experience has to move through us first.
Right. That's so true. And in my lessons that I've been learning, one of those things is to be in the moment rather than, I had a tendency, still find it, to have arguments that have never happened.
Yeah. Well, the what if arguments. Those are the best, right?
Oh, yeah.
What if this happened?
What a waste of time. What a complete waste of time. It's not real. It hasn't happened. It may never happen.
Yes.
But you're doing those things you said. Your emotions are, your heart's racing. You've got all the emotions.
You're in this state of fear, which really is that separation.
Right. And that breaks compassion completely apart because that's just anger.
All right, well, we need to wrap it up here, but why don't you let us know if people want to read your book reviews, where can we get in touch with you, how can we learn more about you?
Okay. My personal blog is lifewalk.info, lifewalk.info, and you'll have articles and a lot of book reviews on that. Then as far as my wife and I we do some marriage counseling, and we have a music ministry. We hope to do some more CDs. Actually, our next one, we hope, is just some pop love songs. That's what I'm working on. But that aspect of what I do is reunionsingers.com, REUNION singers.com. So those are the two of the avenues. And then, of course, you can find me on Facebook, and Twitter, and
awesome.
Instagram.
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. I think a lot of people are going to be moved by the personal stuff that you shared, and maybe they're going through similar troubles, or not sure how to have compassion in that sort of a situation, so they can kind of get in touch with you guys. And so,
well, thanks so much for doing this and for having me, and I appreciate this whole thing you're doing. I hope it's very successful, and I think it will be.
Yeah, thank you. So if you don't know yet what the 21-day compassion challenge is, you can go to the website, watch the video, get the details. And if you would like to get more involved and let us know how it's going for you, how are you seeing changes in your life? What is your favorite act of compassion that you either witnessed or did, or just, how is this impacting your life? There's also a Facebook group that you can join and keep in touch with us there. All right, thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, we're good. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, I hope I didn't get off topic too much.
No, it was perfect.